Hi everyone, welcome to Living La Vita Loca podcast, a retro gaming podcast for some of your retro gaming needs. My name is Fazz.
And I am Rich.
Yeah. It always freaks me out. That made you sound like you just won loads of money.
I mean, if only. One of these days I'm going to hit on like a kind of cadence that
I don't
feels natural.
I don't want that to ever happen.
Yeah, I'll keep playing with it.
I want to always
workshop my own name.
You have to pay for that.
Well, if you
pay the local council.
Get a brand agency on it.
I've been working on this really cool name, and it's so cool I don't have to pay.
I'm going to ditch my my vowels. Just be called like Urch.
Start again. Living La Vita Loca podcast with Urch. Oh, right, okay. That sounds like one of those, not guitar scratch, a record scratch. Start. Yeah, cool. So just do that now.
I'd love to say that was deliberate, but it wasn't.
No. And do the DJ thing. Again, audio format, but I'm doing it for Urch right now.
The hand spin and the other hand on the headphones that aren't there.
You've got a gimmick now. It's great.
It's good.
You don't have to use that.
I might not.
Might.
But
not.
Thanks.
It's okay. Speaking of being filthy rich and covered in gold.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. We're talking about the Olympics, the Olympiad, the however many Roman numerals Olympics this one is.
Quite a few.
I don't know if they call it that anymore. I think they kind of moved. I don't know. I feel like they moved away. You never hear it. You never hear it getting called like 2024 Paris or London 2012. You don't really get. I don't know. Well, maybe they do. Maybe the Romans use them. Maybe only when it's in Rome they'll be used.
Bring them back.
Yeah. So. I'm really sorry. That was a bad start. The Olympics. They are starting on Friday in Paris, and we thought it'd be a great idea to do an Olympic podcast, play some, I guess, what we would say were Olympic games. But when I started looking at the games, they're not necessarily just, well, mine are, but...
Athletics adjacent.
Yeah, athletics adjacent, which made me then think the Olympics aren't just all about athletics.
We could have done football week and it still fit.
We're back on soccer. But yeah, it would have, there's so much there. And my appreciation for the Olympics stretches far beyond athletics. And that made me think we should also maybe do a bit of a list of our favourite Olympic sports as well. So hopefully Rich is prepared for this part of the podcast and, the end of the podcast even, when we're going to talk about our five favourite. I can see him spamming through his phone right now.
I am going to Google that really
wonderful.
Quickly for
Okay,
you.
Right. So we'll do that. I'll let Rich Google his sports, and I'll start my reviews of video games, which is obviously it's a video game podcast. We are going to do some athletics spin Olympic video games. This is really nostalgia tinged for me. This one actually because I played both of the games I played this week. Played quite a lot as a child. One as a real youngster, a Mega Drive youngster. So, yeah, I'm really excited to talk about these because they come from the heart.
Aww.
My ballooning heart that has no chance of doing any athletics at this age. Are you an athlete, Rich? Urch?
Cardio happens to other people nowadays.
like a Stone Cold Stunner. The cardio, it came from nowhere. Did you ever compete? Ever do any track and field? Anything at school or anything?
I got forced to take part in a skipping relay one school sports day. That went exactly as well as you can think when you're a lardy child.
Skipping in the Olympics?
No. Let me check S on the list I've just hurriedly Googled. Because you never know.
It might be.
Lucky.
I mean, breakdancing's in this year. So you could breakdance over a skip rope.
Yeah, no, it's skipping's not in there.
No. I'd be shit at that anyway. Like, as in someone from, I don't know, a far-flung land would absolutely dominate me at skipping. What did I do? I ran the 800 meters like a couple of times, and found out that I was terrible at that because I was actually probably more of a 400 meter runner, and I ran the first 400 meters of the 800 meters like I was running the 400 meters, and I'd be like out ahead, and I'd just get completely dicked. Like in the last 200 meters,
oh dear,
I'd be shattered, and I'd be like, "Why am I not winning anymore? Why are these people going past me?" Like, as in because you spent all ounces of energy. So yeah, that was as far as my career got. I think I did 200 meters once and slipped in the starting blocks and finished last. So and that's kind of continued in life, really. Like the starting blocks of life, I'm on face down on the floor. So. The games that I'm going to be looking at, so I'm going to be looking at Olympic Gold for the Sega Mega Drive. And what are you looking at?
I am looking at DecAthlete on the Sega Saturn, which was apparently known as Athlete Kings in Europe.
Okay.
I didn't know that until days ago.
Until the Athlete Kings were crowned.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
And then I'm going to look at International Track and Field, but that was a PlayStation. Well, actually, Track and Field is an arcade game from the early 80s. And then they brought it back as International Track and Field on the PlayStation 1 and in arcades at 1996, I think it was. But I'm going to be looking at the port to the Game Boy from 1999.
Oh, right.
So, yeah, so it's not quite the traditional International Track and Field that people will probably be aware of. I don't think anyone ever has played International Track and Field on the Game Boy. I did. It was one of the only Game Boy games that I had.
I didn't even know it existed.
Yeah, so you're about to find out about that.
I'm gonna learn
that thing. I was going to say, gift, but it's an item.
Okay,
it's just an item.
Something to regift.
Yeah,
that knowledge.
Yeah, I should have re-gifted this by now. So, I'll start.
Yep.
And then we'll flip into DecAthlete, and then we'll, rebound out with it, like, because that's what happens.
Much like
in a sport.
Like a basketball. Basketball's a sport that they do at the Olympics,
well
isn't
done.
There we go.
Yeah, you found that on the list, didn't you?
I did.
So Olympic Gold then, 1992. I think it was predominantly for the Sega Mega Drive. In fact, it was just purely Sega, and they did it. I think they ported it to the Game Gear and the Master System as well.
Mm-hmm.
So if you didn't have a Mega Drive or a Genesis when you were younger, fuck off. No, sorry. I guess that it was one of those things where it was made in America and then imported into Europe by US Gold.
Oh,
so yeah, they imported everything. They were like, and you think from the name, US Gold, you think like proper like amazing company, which they made loads of money, and they were one of the best sort of video game companies for importing into Europe. They were run by Anne and Jeff Brown from the Midlands. So I just want that to,
is that their full name?
Anne and Jeff Brown, it's in like, you just imagine like these high-powered sort of like executives running a video game company. It's like, hello, Jeff Brown. Like, it's in, like no one's fearing Jeff Brown in negotiations, I don't think, but they must have done a good job. Yeah. The Olympic Gold imported by US Gold into Europe, and so it was basically designed to run a few months just before Barcelona 1992 Olympic Games. Mm-hmm. And the same company had a hand in developing Winter Games, California Games, so they kind of had their, I guess, shtick, their patter down by that point. They knew what they were doing.
Bit of pedigree.
Yeah. Have you played Track and Field on a video game? You played DecAthlete.
I have played DecAthlete. I have played. What have I played? I played like the what were they called? Like summer games and winter games and stuff like that on the Commodore 64.
Okay.
I think I have dabbled with Track and Field once upon a time, many moons ago, but it doesn't stick with me too well. So it wouldn't have been for very long.
Yeah. I guess that what I was trying to drive at there, really, and you can tell me when you get to the DecAthlete review, Olympic Gold and the International Track and Field both have kind of the same mechanic of bash the shit out of two buttons repeatedly like a maniac, or rub a pen on it, or rub your thumb on until there's no thumb left to make it go fast.
Yep.
And then there's also usually a third button when you might do something extravagant like jump a hurdle or throw a javelin or do a pole vault. There's very, I would say from my experience of athletics games or Olympic games, they all seem to have the same sort of mechanic. I don't know if DecAthlete was any different or not. I'm not trying to dip into your review now, but
very, very similar.
Okay, cool. So, I would say then, of all the sports that there were in Olympic gold, for it being the Olympics, there's not much of the Olympiad there. Like, is it?
Right.
It's a small amount of Olympia. Like, Zeus is on holiday, and he's at the top of Olympia, right?
Yeah, sure.
Please Google. So yeah,
talking more foothills rather than mountains.
Exactly.
Right?
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you for saving me there.
Don't know if I did.
No. I'm drowning in the bottom of the pool. So the sporting escapades that are available to you: pole vault, which is a tap, press another button, that kind of thing.
Nice.
Yep. Hurdles, same thing, just bashing buttons, senseless. And then 100 meters, same thing.
Mm-hmm.
Swimming's a little bit different. So swimming is the same idea, but you have to do it rhythmically. So it's almost a slow version of getting into a rhythm, which I very quickly learned when I was like, why am I drowning at the back when I'm hammering the shit out of these buttons?
Flailing away.
It's just like, I'm like, what's going on? And I was like, oh wait, I think I remember literally 30 years ago that actually I have to tap the button slowly on swimming, and it came back to me. So, and the hammer throw as well, same thing. You build up some speed and then you press a button to release the hammer. So they were all kind of, I guess, a bit rote in this game compared to other track and field games. So it doesn't really stand out for that. Mm-hmm. Two of the things that made it stand out, the other two sports, are archery and diving, which it was such a surprise coming back to this game and thinking, actually, I remember these ones being the sports that were my favourite when I was younger, and the reason is because they are a little bit different from everything else that you see. Mm. So archery it's very simple. There's not much to it. You basically are trying to direct using the left and right button effectively where your archer is aiming to, and then you press a button to fire an arrow, which is like ridiculously easy. But there is wind to take into account. And your archer is jittering around like Solid Snake with diazepam. Honestly, it's just like ridiculous. Like, as in, like I know it's windy, but your archer is like already pissed. Like it's just like all over the place. It's like I've never seen anything like it. Where I was like, I assume these people have to qualify for the Olympics, but so I felt quite bad for my archer when I was just like trying to guide him into some gentle coaching of what the fuck are you doing? But yeah, it's fun. It makes it fun, and you always have to wind adjust. Like it's never, the wind does die down, but even when it dies down, you still have to aim massively over the target for it to drop into the target. So there is something to that game, to that part of the game. And then diving. So diving's the most interesting one because it's completely different from anything else. In so much that when you start the diving contest, if you will, is it a contest? Probably competition. Yeah. That would be. And Tom Daly is turning in his nicely knitted jumper somewhere. Like, so you get these buttons presented to you, and on these buttons there is lots of different varieties of styles of dive you can do. And rotation, so it'll be like a little button that'll say 90 degrees, or I can press the next one for 180 degrees, and then it'll also tell you how many times you can press how many times you want to do a rotation. Okay. So you select whatever you want out of these buttons to make a dive, if you to make a dive, to create
the animation,
to create a dive, and then you press a button underneath that will then show you what buttons you have to press on your controller to complete the dive.
That is pretty cool.
Which is awesome. For like 1992, I was like, compared to the rest of it as well, you just kind of like, oh, this is completely different from what I've been doing. Yeah. So I spent the most time trying to create a dive and then to perfect it.
That is pretty cool.
Yeah.
Because I wouldn't have guessed that would be how you'd approach like diving in a game.
Well, yeah. So
nice.
I won't lie to you. It's really hard.
Oh, I bet. I
solid.
Bet you can really set yourself up for a fall.
Yeah, and you do, like, as in, so a couple of notes on it. Your diver looks just like AC Slater from Saved by the Bell. Like, as in, like, like a spitting image of him. And then, secondly, the best part of it is you trying to do the dive and just seeing your diver kind of land at a weird sort of crooked angle on his ass in the pool, and the score's just coming out at the bottom, just 0, 0, 0, 0.1, 0, 0. So you're like, oh, I guess I didn't press those buttons you showed me in the right order. So you go back to that, and then you go, oh, maybe I need to make my dive easier. So it's almost a bit like diving in real life, because then you would get your best competitors would try the hardest dives.
Yeah.
Whereas me, I would try the pencil stick dive
or in the water.
Yeah, or the cannonball. So I was getting to the point where I could get some dives down to sort of 5 or 6 points of each of the judges. But yeah, it was difficult. It was difficult. I mean, excuse me. Apart from that, it is all about that retro nostalgia for me. We don't normally do this on the podcast where we're like, oh, I remember this from being a kid and stuff. We try and review things now. But some of the things that, I guess, stirred inside me were, for example, the starting FMV sequence, or it's not FMV, but like video sequence is of a world map. And it starts to flash up all the dates of the modern Olympic Games and show you, and it does a little pinpoint on the cities around the globe. I've used that knowledge so many times in pub quizzes. It is ridiculous. It's amazing how much that's stuck in my tiny little 4-year-old head. It's like, right, okay, where was this held? 1908, London. It's just like, okay, when was St. Louis? 1928. It's just, don't quote me on that. Check. If you check, you're a shit. I think it is though. So yeah, it was amazing how well that stuck in my head. Yeah. Like remembering that, and the music is. Olympic music, Olympiad music.
All right, let me guess. Like big, like grand.
Bugles,
type.
Bugles. Brass
lights, fanfares and flourish.
It was like, and you kind of go, oh, I remember this music. And the menu is. You get a menu board, and one thing I didn't mention before actually is there's 3 levels of difficulty that you can choose in the game as well, which is really good because it meant that as an adult. Rather, as an adult who's terrible at gaming, it seems I really needed that beginner level of game. As soon as I went up to the middle, whatever, I went up, when I was at club and championship level, fine. As soon as I got to sort of, national level, I was fucked. So an international level, I don't know what you're meant to do to win the 100-meter hurdles at international level. You are going mental on these.
Maybe you need to actually train for it.
Cardio. It happens to people. But yeah, it was just. So there is those 3 difficult levels, and they are presented to you on the screen at the start, and the menu screen is set in the stadium, in Barcelona Stadium, and you've got like a little blimp floating behind it that says it's got the Olympic logo on it. Nice. And a little blimp because it's sponsored by Coca-Cola. You're like, I do want a Coke. And then you'll select your options of what you want to do, so you can add however many of the events you want to. So you could do a mini Olympiad, so you could check, I think you can check like 1, 2, or 3, for example, or you can pick all 8 sports. And yeah, then it'll go. You'll make your selection, and then your little dude will come up with the Olympic flame and light the Olympic torch, cool. and just has the nice sort of like dun, 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 sort of. That's Olympic music, guys. Going on.
Fazz.wav.
Broke the internet, and then those guys should have got me on Crazy Frog all those years ago. They'd have made loads of money out of that. And then when the Olympiad closes, like you get like the sky darkens and there's fireworks in the sky, and nice. It's so good. Like I'm like, it's brilliant. You remember it just being. It was kind of an event for me, like almost like, at the age of between 4 and 6, I was too young to remember the Barcelona Olympics. But when Atlanta came around in 1996, I was stoked. And it was mostly because I'd played so much Olympic gold. So I really owe it something for how it's made me love and cherish the Olympics. And yeah, so don't get me wrong, the game, there's not a lot to it. And for 2/3 of the sport is quite simplistic. But think for like the diving complexity and the fun and nostalgia action for me, I'm going to give it a 6 out of 10. But and that's me being objective, which I know is like you said we shouldn't be. I mean,
you can be if you like.
I can't. Yeah, you could do whatever the fuck you want. But yeah, I'm not going to go and give it a 9 out of 10 because I like the Coke blimp. But they would love that, wouldn't they? Coca-Cola. They would fucking love that. Nowadays it'd be like sponsored by, I don't know, Prime.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was my Olympic gold re-experience that nice. I really enjoyed myself. So yeah. How about you? DecAthlete.
DecAthlete. So yeah, it's a Sega Sports game from the mid-90s, and it's an arcade port. So while you were talking, I did just double check this. Like, it's called DecAthlete, right? 10 deck, right? Yeah. 10 sports in a decathlon. Yeah. I, for some reason, felt the need to double check the number of events.
I wonder what 10. You were doing.
Yeah, no, there are 10 events. I can confirm that.
Top them up.
Yep. So you've got a decathlon mode, which you go through each of them in order. You have the arcade mode, where you go in, you do the kind of 100-meter dash, and then you kind of have a pool of 5 events that you pick from, and then you kind of keep going until you inevitably fail and get game over. And you have a practice mode where you pick your one event, have a go at it, and then your options. So like it's reasonably Spartan in terms of what it'll give you. But for each of the events, before you go in and play it, apart from maybe the 100-meter dash, it does have like an instruction screen, a quick little thing to show you how to play it.
Because Olympic Gold didn't have that.
Yeah, exactly.
It's just like
and I think
learn.
I think there were quite a few where if you didn't have a manual or something like that, you were scuppered. So yeah, it was clearly built with the arcade in mind, and the fact that people are just going to wander up to it and come in completely cold. So in that respect, it actually felt oddly approachable. So you can play 1 or 2 players on it. You barely ever see any of the other athletes. You've got like I think it's 8 athletes to choose from, and
how bad were you?
I was awful.
How good were you?
I was awful. But they each have like different specialisms, if you like. So you have a couple of all-rounders, a couple that are good at jumping, a couple that are good at throwing, and all that kind of stuff. You'll be pleased to know that Jeff Jensen's, the UK athlete, has the greatest like hair and black and white zebra singlet kind of combo you've
Jeff
ever
Brown's
seen.
Friend, Jeff.
It's incredible stuff. So, as you kind of alluded to, you do a lot of button mashing. Like it is, considering it is about sport, it can give you an injury. You do feel like you get RSI, from mashing these buttons. So yeah, 100-meter dash. The way it works is it's kind of a 2-button game. So you have a run button and you have an action button.
Okay.
It's just that because it's
different.
Well, the Sega Saturn's controller has quite a few buttons on it. It only uses 3 because it doubles up the run button. So you can use one at one end of the controller or the other, if you like, one end. They're all on the same side, but it's, the difference is negligible. But the point is that depending on how you hold the controller, suddenly you get 2 thumbs on 2 run buttons, and you feel like you can run twice as fast.
Right, okay, yeah.
I don't know if you actually could, because I was still awful at the events. I can't stress that enough. I was terrible. But, it's an option. So 100-meter dash, you are just mashing the buttons. Long jump, you're mashing the buttons, and then you have to hold down the action button to kind of set the angle of your jump. But you've got to start holding it at the right point in the run. Otherwise, you can foul and all that kind of stuff. Shot put is more down to timing, so it's in time with the rhythm of your breath, and then you hold down the button to set the angle of the throw once you've got it in line with the power. High jump, you're doing a bit of running again, and then if I remember rightly, you have to press the action button to set the angle of your jump, and then I never actually completed one of these jumps. I think you either have to press the button again.
That's promising.
You either have to press the button again, or you have to flick the D-pad to bring your feet over the bar.
Oh my god,
there's like a little
hard.
extra step that I kept forgetting, which, considering I've forgotten it here as well, it kind of proves my point, I guess. 400-meter race, kind of like you were alluding to with the swimming in your one. It's more about rhythm and sort of stamina management and making sure you're kind of in a sweet spot where you're going fast, but you're not wrecking yourself for stamina. 100-meter hurdles, tap run button, occasionally jump stuff. Discus, you've got to spin the D-pad and then fling the thing with the right angle. Pole vault, you're running, you've got to lower the pole, you've got to bring yourself up, and again there's a couple of extra little buttons you've got to press to get over. Point is that you've got these little extra steps that kind of add a little bit of extra spice.
That's good. That's
which
good.
It is good. And
I assumed that all track and field games, because the 2 that I've played are very similar, so it's nice to have a little bit of difference.
I think they were trying to mix it up a little bit. So like javelin as well is reasonably straightforward. Once you've got your head around how this game is going to approach events, you can suddenly look at things like javelin and go, well, actually, I probably would be able to work out, okay, tap, tap, tap to run, hold angle, and then throw. The one that threw me a little bit was the 1500 meters. So because they wanted like a kind of bigger field of athletes for this, but you only ever see two. If you're competing against another athlete, it is literally one other athlete. So like the 100 meters there's two characters on the track. With the 1500 meters, there's two characters on the track, and then you've got like a kind of set of almost like crash test dummy sprites running with you that are kind of like the pack for the run, and you have to like weave around and through while maintaining your stamina and all that, and going against the other athletes. So it does put some interesting spins on it that go more for down the kind of rhythm or like sort of intelligent play route rather than just mashing buttons. So despite the fact there's not many modes, it does feel like there's, a bit of stuff that you can sink your teeth into.
Yeah, it definitely sounds like a lot more variety than anything else.
Yeah, variety's the word.
I'm glad Olympic gold never got 9 out of
10. So, I mean, what is also weird, like, because I would quite often find myself gravitating towards Jeff and his cannon of an arm.
Did they all have different abilities? Do you know or not?
So not so much abilities, but they would have like slightly different. They didn't even really show stats, but they would say like what their kind of area of.
They give them a bio.
Yeah, like a very, very, very brief one. But yeah, you've got an all rounder. You've got one that's good at throwing, one that's good at jumping, all that kind of stuff. My guy Jeff was good at throwing. So like I was crap at all of the events, but my God, I could set a world record in the javelin, motherfuckers. So like
Jeff works down the mine and he eats pasties. It's rock hard.
But it's great to be able to go into this game and be crap at most of it, but then go, actually, that sport, that one, yes, let's go.
Jeff's been throwing children over railings for years, saving them from schoolyards. That sounds weird.
It really does. So yeah, like it's a simple game, but there's a fair bit of variety to it. What puts it over the edge for me and makes it something memorable is just how much frigging character it's got. So like we were saying when we were talking about International Superstar Soccer and FIFA, there is something about International Superstar Soccer that just oozes character. You get the right year, and there is just something in the way it looks, the menus, the music, and how it all just hangs together that just gives you something. It kind of elevates it somehow, and DecAthlete does that for me. It's got that proper like chunky, saturated color, like Sega sprite thing that they were going big on in the mid-90s that I just think is gorgeous nowadays. And it's really, really nice to look at still, I think. And you've got these weird little quirky elements, like Jeff doing all these like bodybuilder kind of poses after his 100-meter dash or whatever. On the menus, another good example, you confirm something on the menu, and instead of just a tone or a noise, you get like a aha kind of noise. Ha ha. And it constantly does it.
That made me laugh so much. I don't know why.
Well, yeah, it did me because it comes out of fucking nowhere. Or like, so a lot of the menus and a lot of the text and stuff is Japanese because it's an import. But it's easy enough to get around, and then occasionally you just get a bit that just flashes up in massive letters. Let's go next game, and stuff like that. And it's just
look, that's clear, that instruction. You can't get wrong. You can't go wrong there. Everyone knows it.
Bits and bobs like that just give it so much character. And yeah, it's just fun. It's a fun game. You can get it reasonably cheap still. If you're importing.
I was going to say the import.
Yeah, like it's reasonably commonplace. So you could do a lot worse than pick it up. So I think for me, it's probably a 7. Like it would be nice if, and I know I've said this before about a couple of other things, but why they haven't brought it back, and put 4-player support on it or whatever. I can imagine it being the basis of a great party game.
Could play it on a joystick, do you think, as well?
Yeah, I think. Well, I mean, in the arcade you certainly could, because that's what it was designed for. And the Saturn has bits and bobs like that you can use, and I think arguably the control setup lends itself better to that.
Yeah.
But even as is, like it's a great port, I think. And yeah, I really enjoyed it. So I think it's an easy 7. On a given day, I'd be able to justify an 8. But
Yeah.
to be honest with you, what was it? Ninja Golf. I took the piss a little bit, giving it a 9. So I'm going to give this a 7 and be a little bit more.
I'm glad
play it safe.
I'm glad that you've recognised that during our summer of sport that
The winner is still Ninja Golf.
You just did whatever you wanted, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I don't think there's anything bad about that. Do you know what I mean? Golf's in the Olympics now, so it's fine. Is Ninja Golf? Come on, the Olympics is surely the best place to have you like the fencing team playing golf with a foil. Is it? I guess one of those really thin swords. Yeah. That would be great. Do you know, like some bullshit like that? Get that into LA 2028.
Yeah, unfortunately, Ninja Golf has not made Paris according to my list.
I mean, what's the point then?
But
I might not even watch
Takeshi's Castle, which is, let's face it, the greatest Olympic sport.
It's all of them just in one, isn't it?
Replace the decathlon with Takeshi's Castle.
Yeah, I mean, effectively, have Konami done that with International Track and Field on the Game Boy? Let's get into that. So, like I said, International Track and Field started as an arcade game in the early 80s, and it's actually called Hyper Olympic, which is a well better name. Like,
it sounds a bit sci-fi.
Yeah, Hyper Olympic.
Or like a horrible illness.
Yeah.
Sorry, I can't.
Hyper Olympic.
Hyper Olympic.
I've gone Hyper Olympic.
I've been in hospital all night with my Hyper Olympic.
With Hyper Olympic. It's like it could be that sounds like it could be a lymphoma though, and like it would. Yeah. I prefer the Hyper Olympic. Like as in. Anyway, so better name. So National Track and Field. Like I said at the start, this is the 1999 version for the Game Boy Colour, which I played on my Game Boy Pocket, which does have, funnily enough, colour my review a little bit, which we'll get to in a little while. The soundtrack is spectacular. It is the best chip tune. Like, just, it gets you so pumped up. You're holding a little Game Boy in your hand, and you're like, it just gets you ready for sport, which is what all the people that have got Game Boys in their hands are ready to do. It's just brilliant. It's a proper Rocky-esque montage music set inside a Game Boy. As soon as you get into the game, the menus are the same. As soon as you start racing, the music sort of like drops, but then comes back. Like it just, when it's around, it feels like a really great game. You feel good about yourself. The playing of the game, the actual events. So there's different modes. I'm going to spend time probably on the story mode, which no other track and field game, no International Track and Field on the PlayStation has a story mode. This has a story mode built into it, which is, I'll get into, which is chunky and sizable. The other mode is the hyper mode. Hyper mode basically is just doing the events and kind of practicing them. So much like, it seems to be the magic number pretty much, like DecAthlete or, Mr. Daly, John Daly? He played golf. Daley Thompson, there we go. Daley Thompson decathlon as well. So 10 events.
I bet that's why they had to change the name of DecAthlete in Europe.
They did.
Is it because of Daley Thompson?
Yeah. They were going to get sued.
Yeah.
So by Daley Thompson, presumably. So yeah, there's 10 events. So 100 meters, 110 meter hurdles, 400 meters, 1,500 meters, javelin, pole vault, discus, high jump, long jump, shot put. Put me to sleep, that list, kind of, because it's just the same as what we've heard and seen before.
Ones.
There's nothing necessarily different. And every single one of these sports is just hammer your A and B button as fast as you possibly can. And then occasionally you would try and press the up button on the D-pad to do the action of the jump, for example, or do the action of throwing the javelin.
Is it difficult to see what's on the screen if you're mashing buttons?
Yes, yeah. It is awful. It is like so. This definitely is what I meant about colouring the sort of the review in so much. Doing it on a Game Boy, doing it on a Game Boy Pocket, trying to hold it at an angle, whatever angle you possibly can, to hammer A and B as much as possible while you're holding onto it. You can't see the screen. You have to just run blindly and hope that it's going to go well for you. To add to that, the events effectively just like stickmen. Like like it is graphically horrendous on the Game Boy. I couldn't believe it when I went back to it, and I was like, I think I remember having fun with this game when I was like 11, but I must have had tiny hands. Like, I've got small hands for an adult. Like, I must have had tiny hands as a child, because it must have worked much better, because it was so difficult to do now as a fully grown man. Like, mostly fully grown man. It really did make it for that be the main thrust of what an international track and field game should be, which is being able to compete in the events. It looks shit, and it was really hard to do. I would say near impossible to be able to keep your eye on the screen while you're going.
Yeah, God.
It's like being in some sort of like crazy ass roller coaster, like that you were creating for these little humans that are inside this box. All that said, that's the eventing part of it. The story mode, which is, I guess, the main mode of the game. I think they must have realised that it was a hard sell to put this type of game onto the Game Boy Pocket, or the Game Boy, even Gameboy Colour. And they kind of created this story mode where you are a decathlete in training at college, and you're basically starting from the ground up. It is just a career mode, effectively.
Right.
But you've got all the events that you can compete in on a monthly basis, but you rarely see them. You rarely see the actual international track and field game. Almost like they were trying to keep it away from you. I wonder why. And instead of, you've got this sort of like life that you're living in your college dorm. I bring it up again because it seems to be a formative game for me, reluctantly. Like Phoenix Wright, where you move between two rooms effectively on a background. You've got your college dorm room, and then you've got the track. And you basically spend your time, do you know what I liken it to probably the most? Is a Tamagotchi.
Right.
Like, it's like your person is like a Tamagotchi, and you, instead of like wiping their ass and feeding them, you are setting up their schedule for their training of the week.
Right.
Which
so it's
is
almost more like a management game.
Yeah, pretty much.
Right,
yeah.
Right.
And which is interesting in itself. Although the variance of how you can manage the person is very limited.
Right.
So there seems to be like a few different, I guess, things that you can manage. You manage the running ability, the jumping ability, the stamina and power stats, and you do that by deciding what type of training you're going to do during the week. But you also you have to manage the condition/stress stats. So the prior stats are all measured numerically. It's quite easy to keep a hold of. The condition/stress is just measured by a bouncing, smiling ball in the top corner. And obviously, if he becomes more stressed, then it becomes sad. Typical Konami, just like
that's Konami, isn't it?
Pro Evolution Soccer.
Yeah.
So you kind of think, right? Well, so the schedule, you'll set it up, and then it'll move to another screen by the track, and it'll just be a tiny little sprite showing you working out. It'll be like, oh, you've done power stats today, but because you did power, you became more stressed about this, or your jumping ability is not as good. So you're like, all right, okay, fair enough. Like I can stick with this for a little bit and see how it goes. The really interesting part of it is, on top of that, you do have an actual life as this person. So weirdly, the only day you can interact with other people is a Sunday. So all the rest of the days you're just training, or you can have a rest day if you want to. It's like, oh, I'll just stay in my dorm and watch TV today, and then your stress will go down, but your condition will go down as well. So you do have to have those rest days. But yeah, on a Sunday you can call other people up, of which there's a very limited number of people. But you can call up your coach, your training partner. You can call up potential love interests, which could be your coach or training partner. It can be male or female, which is quite progressive for a Game Boy game in 1999 about athletics.
That's really unexpected.
Yeah, I know. At one point, a wacky scientist calls you up and says, let me experiment on your body and we'll see if your stats go up. And obviously you go,
love interest.
Yeah. Yeah, like Rocky Horror.
How progressive was this game?
You so obviously say yes because you're like, what have I got to lose? You know, like
Yeah.
my sprite man dies. I don't really know. I've not seen a bad circumstance. So, but yeah, so you let this wacky scientist at the college experiment on you, and it just like nukes your stats. It's like your stats all went up by 20 or whatever, and you're super happy. I was like, all right, great. So yeah, there's a lot going on. You can even miss the. You would think the events would be all right. Okay, that's your bread and butter. That you have to do.
Yeah, that's why you're doing this.
No, you can miss them by mistake. You could be on a date, and then your coach rings you up and says, "You really let us down, bitch." It's just like it's so weird. Yeah, so it does feel like a like you said, like a sports management game, but I still feel like it does feel like a Tamagotchi in so much there's very limited stuff that you can do on that. Like you've still got those 2 buttons, and it's like, oh, I've pooed. Oh, I've not trained today. So yeah, I really appreciated that part, and I remember like being 11 years old. It was before The Sims came out. I really got into that. Like I remember being really invested in this person's relationships he had with other people, and I remember playing this game for a long time to try and make sure that he was happy rather than actually a good athlete, because you couldn't. I mean, looking back now, I don't think you could ever do very well at the athletics because it's impossible to do. But you could definitely make this dude Fazz, obviously. You could make Fazz happy, like as he goes through. You even get like rivals and enemies who like come onto your dorm and just like, hey, I'm going to bust you up next week and stuff on the track. You're like, oh, you again. Like, I fucking love it. It's brilliant. So yeah, there was some fun to be had, but for an athletics game, if you divide that away from the management part of it, it's awful. So yeah, a solid 4 out of 10 for me. Yep. I can't recommend that you go and play this necessarily to go play it in international track and field. Stick to the PlayStation version or any of the new versions, like the PlayStation 2 version. If you want to go and play a weird life management game that you have some sort of input into, some sort of stats, quite fun.
Oh, it sounds intriguing.
Yeah, it definitely sounds intriguing. So you don't expect it, and even though I'm remembering now that I had a really good time with it when I was a kid, I couldn't remember what it was about it. I remember there was this story mode to it, but I couldn't remember what that was about. And now it's all come flooding back to me that, you know, at the age of 11, when you're starting to be interested in having girlfriends and you can manage your budding decathlete to have a girlfriend or a boyfriend, you have some sort of semblance of control over it.
Explore your sexuality through this tiny little.
And then your parents come into the room and you're there beating the shit out of the Game Boy, back turned to the door.
Sentence was going to go somewhere else.
Well, it looks like something's going on. What are you doing, son? I'm playing track and field.
Fazz, please go outside.
No, my girlfriend will dump me. So yeah, that was 2 games for me that at the sort of mid-90s and late 90s that were real kind of formative experiences for me. In video gaming, and I remember coming back to buying International Track and Field for the PlayStation 3 when I was at university, and having like 6 controllers, and just like, because you could get 4, I think you can get 4 people on International Track and Field on the PlayStation 1. Mm-hmm. So you could, to have 4 people gathered around that and absolutely bashing the shit out of buttons. That came from playing that a lot in the 90s, by myself in my bedroom on my Game Boy with my wife that I married after my decathlon career in college, obviously. Formative in video gaming, but formative for my love of the Olympic Games as well. So, do you like? Probably a weird.
Do I care?
Do you give a shit about the Olympics?
I am glad it exists. It's never really something that I go out of my way to like binge watch or anything like that. I'm glad that a lot of sports get that kind of stage, that kind of chance to showcase a little bit. But for watching stuff, I'll never sit down with the schedule and be like, oh yeah, I need to watch that. I need to watch that. I only ever seem to end up watching stuff by accident. You know,
Okay.
if it's on and nothing else is doing, I'll stick it on in the background or whatever for a bit, or I'll catch highlights or something like that. Like I'm never disappointed to see that it's on. It's rare that I'll go out of my way to watch it.
I think that I'm a bit of an Olympics smack addict. Like, as in, I will watch as much of it as I can, and the more obtuse the sport, the better. Like, I don't want to watch the football. I mean, and most people probably don't go to the Olympics to watch the soccer. Like, you know, that isn't, for example. I mean, I'm super excited, as you would expect, if anyone listens to the podcast or knows us, about flag football being in 2028.
Yeah,
So that'll be really cool to see that on, you know, an international stage. I know it exists now for the World Cup and things, but for people to be watching the Olympics and go, oh, you know, flag football outside, you know, especially outside of the USA, it'd be great.
Yeah.
So yeah, let's have a little talk then about, you know, since I'm more committed than you are, probably potentially, about your 5 favourite Olympic sports that are being hosted in Paris, which you definitely researched
I've got
before the start of the podcast.
Got a list.
You know,
this is fine.
Yeah, cool.
I can do this.
Okay, cool.
Yeah,
fine.
I can do 5.
It's fine. It's cool. Yeah. I mean, there are more than 5 there, so
There
you know,
are.
like,
There's quite a big list, isn't there?
you know, of all the sports that you don't watch. So yeah, I think you go first. Then I will. You know,
Do you want me to do all 5, or do you want to go like one then the other?
yeah, we'll go one and the other.
One and the other.
We'll go one and the other.
Cool. In that case, straight off the bat, because it's near the top of the list, basketball.
Okay.
It is probably the Olympic sport I've watched the most of.
Really?
Over the years. Yeah, like I went through
Dream team.
a phase when I was younger of being really into basketball. Unfortunately, we never had Sky or anything like that.
We never had a basketball.
So a lot of the time, the only way you could watch basketball in my house was when the Olympics were on, and so I would.
That's fair. That's cool. I mean, it's like you do forget that now,
Yeah,
really, with
yeah,
the
definitely.
advent of all the satellite TV and people being able to have it maybe more readily in apps and things. But yeah, I mean, you know, it's still behind a paywall now, so basketball probably is.
Yeah.
And so you get the 3-on-3 basketball now, and you know, in the Paralympics,
you
wheelchair basketball's really, really competitive, really good. So you know that.
Sorry,
No,
a bit of an aside, but you mentioning Paralympics as well. Like, I don't think there's ever been a Paralympics video game, and it feels like maybe perhaps there should be.
Yeah.
Because I remember for London 2012, I managed to watch a little bit of the marathon when it went past. You know, I stood on a street corner and saw it go past. But we actually got along to one of the venues for I think it was the Paralympic tennis or something like that. Like really entertaining. So yeah, just as an aside, seeing as we're talking Olympics.
You know, I mean, the fact that they've got Mario and Sonic at the Olympics, you think they could just have a Paralympic game.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would make sense. Me then, recently probably as like I'd say probably London getting into it because we did quite well in the event. Canoe slalom. So I absolutely love the canoe slalom. It's one of the ones that I always seek out and actually spend time watching as much of it as possible. I don't know what it is about the canoe slalom that gets me so excited. Like I love
the havoc.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. I love. It sounds so fucking weird. I love flowing water. Love. I love artificial
flow.
I love artificial flowing water. What is wrong with me? I don't understand.
No idea.
But anyway, yeah. And then you know to have a competition on that, and it's great. That you know they really, really. You don't get a big crowd around it. But the 10 or 15 people that are there are just so into it. Like, they're fucking going crazy for it at the edge. Just like, you know, I'm like, you know, you just imagine all these people like me that are out there just like, fucking love canoe slalom. Like, you know, it's the thing for me. So, you know, I'm a canoe slalomist.
Yeah, sure. Let's go with that.
You are super bad.
Well, I'm actually weighing up a couple of options. I'm going to mention skateboarding because, like,
son of a bitch.
Yeah,
it's on mine though, so go for it.
We've talked about it at length in other episodes and things like that, and it was great to see that it was getting that kind of Olympic. Like I said, that Olympic showcase. And it's good that it's sort of stuck. And yeah, always nice to see it on telly.
Yeah, and I mean, I know that we've got a vested interest, which is nice to have in Sky Brown and another young lady I can't remember the name of, who's in it this year as well. So it's always nice to have an athlete in a sport that isn't, everybody watches the Olympics and goes, oh, it's great and it's wonderful. But as soon as you don't really have somebody in that sport of some kind, for me personally, whether you like it or not, you kind of it goes a little bit to the wayside a little bit, where I'm like, oh, there's no one, even competing from sort of the region I live within. So, I don't want to see everybody get dicked on at table tennis all the time. Whereas China are just there absolutely winning all the time. So yeah, I feel like, a vested interest, not like gambling with golf last week, where it's just like you have to have somebody, but certainly someone to root for is vital. So I'm really excited about the skateboarding too. So that's one off my list too. Track cycling. So I am chalk and cheese with track cycling and road cycling. Road cycling balls the shit out of me. Track sprint cycling over relatively quickly. Especially when you get the things like the Kieran, where they're all just following a little man on a bike, like on a motorbike. That's fun. That's just ridiculous. The guy on the motorbike looks like a right tit, and he's just there, his little scooter going, Ree! And they're all these powerful cyclists just can't wait to beat the shit out of him at the front. So that's good. So yeah, track cycling for me.
Nice. So what? Third one for me? Yes, yeah. Third one. Boxing.
Ah, cool. Yeah.
Again, it's a sport that I never really go out of my way to watch or anything like that. I would struggle to name boxers, for example. But yeah, it's one of those ones.
The boxing man.
If ever I happen across it at the Olympics, I will happily watch it for a little bit.
Cool. Yeah, I think that you only get, is it 3 rounds in boxing? And then the shortened rounds maybe as well. So that's got that quick fire thing as well, where you can get through quite a lot of it quite quickly. And it's not just not that boxing is a drag, but if it's a heavyweight battle that lasts 12 rounds and stuff, you're not there for ages. You can just dip in and out. So that is good.
I think as well, it's it taps into the part of my brain that likes fighting games as well. Obviously it's a combat sport, but crucially it's one that, even with a rudimentary grasp of the rules I've got, you can still follow what's going on reasonably easily. And
I feel like in all of the sort of boxing martial arts, that it's really vital that the commentator knows what's going on, because you kind of get it's very nip and tuck. 1 point usually decides an Olympic event pretty much, and that can happen very quickly. So to know how the scoring goes is really important. So the commentators play a really good part in that, and I've always enjoyed that Olympic Games. They always seem very well, for being spread across so many sports, they always seem to do a good job of being able to be well informed about every single sport, which is cool. So I've got next hockey. So of the ball variety, not ice hockey. So again, similar to what you were saying about basketball, for example. I never really watched hockey. I don't know if you can watch hockey. I assume there's some sort of app somewhere you can watch hockey on. I quite enjoy hockey. In terms of is it 20-minute thirds? I think it is for hockey, and usually I have a vested interest in the Great British team, men and women as well. And yeah, it's a good. Most of the sports I enjoy watching are mostly solo sports. That's the one team sport that I think is a bit different, that I don't get to watch all the time. That it's an Olympic event to me rather than say an all the time event. I'm sure there's people who play hockey who listen to this podcast who will be like, it is an all time sport. You're wrong. It's an Olympic sport. I'm gonna get battered for
that. So my next one, we kind of touched on it with some of the bits we ended up saying about boxing, actually. Taekwondo. And that again falls into that bracket of, it's an opportunity to learn a little bit more about it and get into some of the realms of, well, how does this actually work as a competitive sport rather than just battering someone, and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, that's a good example of how what I do like about the Olympics is that chance to learn about something new. And when you get the extra bits and bobs online, these little 5-minute explainers of what this sport actually is, and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, no, they're cool. And those little snippets are really important to kind of, like you say, if you do get that time where you're like, oh, I'm going to spend 2 hours watching this, you need to be able to sort of know what's going on. What's going on. And lastly for me then, because we shared the skateboarding one, BMX racing.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
I've really, really enjoyed that. I think we won a gold medal last time, and yeah, that's a relatively new event at the Olympics. That's just pure speed, a lot of fun, like getting over those bumps and stuff. I always like is it the ski cross at the Winter Olympics? That's a similar sort of thing, where you get that sprint aspect of it over a bumpy course. I don't want to see people hurt themselves necessarily, but I like the risk that it might happen.
Love a good pratfall.
Yeah. So, you got any more?
Yeah, no, I got one more. Rugby sevens.
Okay, yeah.
Obviously, not really watched it at the Olympics before, but I am looking forward to being able to. And hopefully, someone will look at the viewing figures and go like, "Oh, hey, there's one extra person on that."
Yeah.
Yeah, like it's nice to see it getting a bit of a nod. So yeah, looking forward to that.
What was your guy called in Decathlete? What was he called?
Jeff Jensen's.
Jeff Jensen's. So you might have heard it's summertime here in the UK, and there's children playing outside. So if you heard them enjoying themselves, I am going to send Jeff Jensen's outside to throw him over a wall because they're interrupting the podcast. So I want to see how far Jeff could throw a child.
Probably quite far.
Yeah, well, record standard, maybe.
Oh yeah.
So anyway, thanks very much for listening, guys.
Cheers.
Bye.